How are we doing today, everybody? So I planned on doing a meta update so far for the format now that we have more than just the one event in to see how decks are performing, which decks are doing well. But a lot of the information on Ink decks had incomplete tournaments, so I'm going to give it to like Tuesday, Wednesday. Maybe we'll just do it every Wednesday, a midweek meta update, something along those lines. Also, keep an eye out. Shortly, we'll have an updated spreadsheet tracking the tops, and that will get linked in videos in the future. So make sure you come back, like, share, subscribe, hit that little bell if you want. But today, I have a deck that I really liked last format, and it never really saw its true light. However, I had a Patreon take my list from last format, went and got his Ursula Playmat. He took second place, and there was actually two other Ruby Steel decks that ended up also getting their Ursulas in the final week of the set championship. So how does the deck fare into set 5? I actually think it does really good. I think its Bucky matchup actually wasn't horrible, but the fact that you don't have to game plan for Bucky, I think opens up quite a bit with decks, and I like where this format is. Like, Steel Song is very prevalent. Whole New World is a card that I consider putting in this list, but at the end of the day, I think it runs fine without it, and if your opponent hits you with Whole New World, that's okay. It's kind of like when you play Ruby Sapphire and you're like, sure, give me a new hand. I'll refill my hand. Versus hyper aggro decks too. This deck has so many good answers for it. You can kind of see some on the screen there. But I think the deck handles hyper aggro really, really well. I think it's decent into the Steel Song matchup. I think it fares pretty well. I think versus Pete decks, it actually does really good too, because you're not very reliant on a lot of these action cards. You have a lot of really strong characters. So I think this might be like the anti-meta deck of choice. And if I get 4 Sad Beasts, I'm going to be playing this deck. Unfortunately, I don't have them right now, so I won't be playing this deck for the foreseeable future. In real life, I did last format just make the list. I put 4 Fortis Spheres in there because it's a draw, and you can actually banish it to, say, make your Robin Hood a bodyguard to protect other characters, get a potential draw if they're able to crash multiple characters into it, things like that. So if you're looking for a way to cut about $200 off of this deck, take out the beast, put in 4 Fortis Spheres. It's not going to be as good, but it might still be good enough. So the deck has 14 uninkable cards. We're pretty high in our 3 costs. Otherwise, the deck is pretty straight across the board. We do get a little bit higher into this format, or into the ink curve this format. Pete's the only new card I play too. Out of the new set, I'm not huge on a lot of the Ruby or Steel cards. Like, some of them have some niche uses within other deck builds, but for this deck build, I don't think that there's much that the deck really needs. I think it's other cards in the deck that change, and we'll kind of talk about that. So Captain Hook is actually the first change. Daisy presents a 4 willpower threat on board early. Being able to come down with Captain Hook or Robin Hood on turn 1 is just really, really strong. It allows you to apply that pressure. Having the challenger status too, also really good, and he does actually protect your Smee from taking the damage because he's a captain. So he actually has quite a bit of utility right now. So Hook is the first card from this format that changes. I didn't play him last format because it was a bit slower. We were easing off on our 1-drops kind of for most decks, but with aggro being a threat that it is, and as popular as it is, I think Captain Hook, rightfully so, makes his way back into the deck. For Robin Hoods, again, we're playing Steel. We're playing a more character-focused deck. Robin Hood is just incredible. And then on turn 2, so this deck can get really aggressive. Like, you drop turn 1, Hook or Robin Hood. Then turn 2, your plays are Flynn Rider or Smee. Flynn versus a lot of Sapphire decks. A little bit less now because they have like Tipo, Chicha, some other cards for them early plays. However, I don't know how much of that's actually going to stick. Being an aggro format, maybe early on they do, but at the same time, I'm still not sold on it. But Flynn maybe finds his way out of the deck, but for now, I think he's still really strong, and I like him in there. But Flynn or Smee allow you to get real aggressive on turn 2 and just start applying a lot of pressure. Robin Hood presents that shift line. Captain Hook presents the protection for Smee. So the cards kind of go hand in hand so far on turns 1 and 2. And then we get into turn 3. We have 2 Daring Visitor Sisus. I really like her this format, like really, really like her. I've kind of surprised how little I've seen of her in Ruby decks, but she clears out the Daisy Duck right away. She clears out, well, pretty much any of those aggro threats, Daisy Duck, Flynn Rider, Curse Merfolk, Maleficent, Lilo, Rapunzel, Hiram Flaversham. She actually hits a lot of cards right now, and I think that this card is super underrated. Sisu Daring Visitor, I really, really like this format. She's the second card that made her way into the deck that I was not playing previously, just because, again, she answers so many cards early on. One of your ways to combat aggro, I mean, we have other things like Brawl, hint, hint, that we'll get to, but I really, really think Sisu is underrated and slept on this format, and she's gonna prove her worth. Maybe I'll do a top 10 video. Should we do a top 10 video on slept on cards for set 5? Let me know down below. So then a great follow-up to your Flynn Rider on 2 would obviously be your Sisu Emboldened Warrior on 3, because this early in the game your opponent probably has a lot of cards in hand, so she's probably gonna have like 4 strength, 5 strength, something like that, and she quests for 2 with 4 willpower. That's just really good, again, especially if you have that Flynn and you get 3 lore off Flynn, then you quest for her with 2, and that's just a 5 lore quick play. I still like that play until it gets proven it's not good enough. I do really like it. If you don't see her though, Benja, he's another option who can 1, hit an item, or 2, quest for 2. So you got your Smee, your Flynn, your Benja, your Sisu. Like, you can get really aggressive in these first 3 turns, and I think that's something that when playing this color combination, people don't really necessarily expect. They expect the steal songs. They expect the board wipes of red late game. They expect like a super strong mid to late game from this color combination. But you actually come out swinging really hard and get very aggressive early on. And that's kind of the way the deck works. And it almost throws you for a loop. Like, it's actually a pretty aggressive deck. I'd say it's still a mid to late range deck, but it has these options to go really quick, really early. 2 Pete's, I think Steel Song, you definitely want him. Can prevent like a whole new world potentially, especially if they go like Queen. Well, I guess if they went Queen, you're not stopping that no matter what on turn 2. But like Whole New World, if you can prevent it, but at the same time, Whole New World's not necessarily that bad. A lot of the Steel Songs aren't that crippling, because if you can get to that late game, I do like the way the deck handles into that matchup. I think we trade really well, and it's probably close to 50-50 with Steel Song. But Pete's mostly there for your other Ruby matchups to just get that protection against like Be Prepared. So Pete, I try not to ink him unless you have to, but you hold him in your hand and you keep him until, okay, your opponent's got 6 ink, Be Prepared might be coming, I got a big board, I'm going to drop the Pete so I can close out the game and you can't Be Prepared me. I don't think you need more Pete, because again, it's not like you need him or you want to see him every game. He's very useful, especially in the Ruby matchups, but overall, I don't think he has like the same utility that like Amethyst Steel has with Pete, where you can just keep bouncing him and playing him that way. I think that deck is much better utilizing multiple Petes. So I think 2 is actually really, really clean in this deck. We do have an even 30-30 split on the 2 color combinations, by the way. Kind of neat. That usually don't happen. And then we get into our 4 and 5 drop characters. So it's Goofy's Super Squad. Obviously, we were playing the Super Goof. Between your Sisus, your Benjas, your Flynns, your Smees, and your early cards, it's not uncommon to be able to get to a lot of lore quickly. And one thing when I was playtesting this deck last format, I was like, okay, especially versus like Ruby Sapphire, all of a sudden you just get to this point where they stop you in your tracks and you cannot close it out. You can't get that last 1, 2, 3, 4 lore. Well, having a way to get instant lore via Goofy, you let them, okay, they played a card and now it's exerted. You Super Goof, rush into it, get 2 lore. He actually provides a really, really strong way to close out games. The 2 willpower, again, 4 willpower, very strong there. 2 inkable, just the rush. I really like Super Goof for closing out these games. Again, you get this real aggressive start and then you drop him on 4 and you can get that 2 lore just boom, done like that. And I think it helps out so much. if your aggro start doesn't quite get you there, if Goofy doesn't quite get you there, well, guess what? Now you're hitting the bread and butter of the Ruby and Steel deck types. You have your Maui, which can help clear castles, libraries, locations, big-bodied threats, things like that. So we're playing 4 Maui. It's just another inkable rush card that is absolutely crazy. That's why he's still the $14. I think he's just a rare also. Or is that be, he is a rare. 4 beasts. Like I said, beasts right here, and then 4 Robin Hoods. This is where the cost of the deck is, like $550 or whatever. 320 of it's right here. If you don't have either, honestly, I don't know exactly what to tell you. The deck would drastically change. They're both just so important here. Beast helps you get back in late game. He does so much on his own, and if he's damaged, being able to actually swing for 7 is really strong. There's been times where I would use let the Storm Rage on and put 2 damage on him just so he could say clean take out a castle in 1 swing, especially if you don't need the draws anymore. But Beast is just really good with the draws. Robin Hood, obviously, the draw to replace themselves. They both do lose to Medusa, and I've heard people say if it loses to Medusa, don't play it, and that is just the dumbest comment I have ever heard. Like, you wouldn't play so many cards then. But Robin Hood, so strong. Beast, so strong. And Robin Hood, another one kind of like Super Goof. If you get little Robin Hood down, the shift Robin Hood attack into something, get the 2 lore, helps close out those games really strongly. But our big late game threats not all, most quest for multiple. As we continue on into our 6 and higher threats too, we have 3 Medusas, which again, she's removal. We have 3 Tinkerbells, who's a multi-quester and deals passive damage. And then lastly, the new addition to the deck is the Sisu Empowered Sibling, 5/4 quest for 3. But a shift 6 with adding little Sisu in and playing 6 little Sisus. I actually felt like, okay, I could take out 1 Tinkerbell, 1 Medusa, and put in a couple Sisus. It felt good. I don't disagree with it at all. Like, it stinks if you don't have the little Sisus because she's uninkable because it's 8, but you have 6 little Sisus, right? And coming down with her, shifting, she's so strong. It's such a powerhouse card. Another card that ended up getting cut from the deck was Along Came Zeus, and that's just because, like, playing around Pete, I thought that adding in the hook, the little Sisu here, and big Sisu, those were the new cards that weren't here last format again. I think especially right now with the aggro format we're in, and with Steel Song being what it is, because Sisu actually puts in work for Steel Song too. We're talking Cinderella, Daisy Duck, Little Robin Hood if they have them, Ursula, the Rapunzel, like Piglet if they play Piglet. There's so many cards that Sisu actually hits in that deck. Really, really strong shift. Quest for 3 again, pretty good. Does lose to a Zeus because it deals 5. She has 4, but you can't beat them all. You can't beat everything. That's just kind of how the game goes. Into our actions, then we play 11, and that rounds out the deck. So again, we took out the Zeus because Pete being so popular, and especially near me, my locals is just tons of steel, whether it's blue steel, Steel Song, purple steel, like lots of steel. I'm expecting to see Pete a ton. So only playing the 11 actions. Brawl and Storm Rage on usually aren't going to get shut down by Pete too often either. The Be Prepared that with Sisu and the other cards, I did drop it down to 3. Brawl, I think, is still just too good to be at 4, and you play it at 4. Storm Rage on again. It's another way to draw a card. It's a cheeky option, but also just that 2 damage really strong means like Robin Hood swing into Daisy, then Storm Rage on Daisy takes it out, and you get to draw a card. But I think the deck is actually really, really strong this format. It lacks from draw power. That's definitely the big one. You could play the Queen of Hearts, so when you're challenging, you get draws. I'm not a huge fan of that. Like, I mean, if you get to Beast, Robin Hood replaces himself. Your Storm Rage on, you can play Whole New World. But again, I think where the format is at, it's not that terrible with the slight lack of draw power. because versus red blue, you can go really aggressive early and try to close the game out before draw power becomes an issue. Versus blue steel, same thing, but if they're playing wheel, well, guess what? They're going to refill your hand for you. Same thing with steel song. If they wheel you, they're refilling your hand anyway, or you take out one of their best play lines. Versus ruby amethyst, you could definitely get outpaced as far as advantage, so trying to get aggressive versus ruby amethyst, because again, that is a deck that will out resource you because of their draw. Same with purple steel. That's another deck that has a chance to just really get that advantage over you. However, if they try to like Pete lock you, they're going to be a little disappointed, because not saying Pete doesn't do anything, it's just a little lackluster versus this deck compared to some other things. And versus aggro decks, a lot of aggro decks lose their hand quick anyway, so you're kind of just losing your hand with them, but you're putting out the better board presence, and you just take out their board easily, and you win the game that way. So I think overall this deck has a very strong chance to be a really, really good counter to the meta. It's expensive for what it is though, and I think that's going to deter a lot of people, but I think this deck's a sleeper. I think this deck potentially could be A tier if enough people would play it. I just don't think that they're going to, but if they do, I think this deck has a lot of potential. So if you have your beasts and your hoods, I personally would go ahead and play this deck. I'm going to work on getting my beasts, and then I'm going to be playing this deck. So yeah, like, share, subscribe, comment down below. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for watching the video. Thanks for sticking to this part. Again, updated meta analysis every single week, and I have some ideas for the spreadsheet to make it a little more current or something like that. So thanks for watching. Like, share, subscribe. I already said that already, but I really meant it already. Thanks. Take care.